Welcome, everyone. It's Larry Johnson, your host for 8 Principles Voices, and I'm delighted to have with me a man by the name of Tim Kachuriak today. I've known Tim for a few years, and he's what I call my tech whiz, everything technology and marketing as well. See, I'm already embarrassing him, but he's really, really good. And we're going to take up some really interesting topics today. And one of them I want to get into, and I know I can really get straight with Tim, is all the furor and the hoopla and everything else over tech and nonprofits, the use, abuse, and everything else. We're also going to a little bit more about his business and the success that he's had, and that he's a white hat guy. I'll honestly say that up front. So welcome, Tim.
Hey, Larry, thanks for having me. Been looking forward to it.
Now, let's give the audience just a little bit of feel for, they probably already know who you are to some extent, but you grew up in Western Pennsylvania, you went to Robert Morris, and you're a marketing guy, but now you're in technology. So how did that happen?
Well, sort of. I think technology is a little bit of a misnomer. I use technology, but what I'm really into is communication and fundraising, right? So technology is just another vehicle to deliver a message to a potential or existing supporter of a cause. So I like technology and the fact that it makes things efficient, but in many cases, it sometimes can muddy the waters and really prove to be highly ineffective. So what we try to do is we try to figure out how to best optimize the use of technology to deliver that message to a prospective or existing donor.
All right. So you mentioned there's efficient, there's also effective. And so presumably you're going to come to that place where they both meet together, right?
That's why we use the term optimized. So here's the thing, Larry, I've been obsessed for decades with this one simple question. Why do people give? When you think about that, if you could really decode and answer that question, you could change the world. And so on this quest to try to understand what makes people say yes to giving, I realized that the web, the internet, is perhaps the greatest behavioral laboratory that's ever existed. Because what we can do is we can run real-time experiments where people are presented with two different options of a potential fundraising appeal or message or headline or ad. And we can monitor how people respond in real time. It's one thing to ask people their opinion. It's another thing to actually observe how they behave. And so we've kind of turned the web into a living laboratory. We've run over 7,000 experiments with some of the largest nonprofit organizations on the planet. And we're just starting to scratch the surface as to what works and what doesn't when it comes to digital fundraising.
So let's translate that into the traditional face-to-face higher end fundraising. You want to make a comment about that?
Well, when you're having a face-to-face conversation, it's usually one-to-one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I have like a website, I may be having hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people coming to that website. And what I can do with technology is I can split the traffic that's coming to my website, and I can have recipe 1 and recipe 2. And every other person is going to get one or the other. And I can observe how people respond to those different messages.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully when I design an experiment effectively, I start with a very clear hypothesis. I believe that if I change this, that this will be the potential outcome based on, some sort of assumption. And you can go run the experiment, and you can, in many cases, validate the experiment. And the hypothesis is either correct, yes, you're right, this does work better, or you're wrong and it doesn't. But every single time you run an experiment, it produces learnings. And that's what we're after. We're trying to really accumulate wisdom.
So then you're also discriminating between donor acquisition and donor retention as well, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, like, retention is probably I guess the biggest black eye that we have in the nonprofit space. We're really good at acquiring donors. We're really, really bad at keeping them. And so we're testing, yes, both acquisition, cultivation, retention, reactivation, all up and down the kind of donor life cycle.
Well, that's one of my hobby horses, the poor retention rates, which, overall now hover around 40%. What for-profit business could survive losing 60% of their customer base every single year? Think about that.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. And then, of course, as you know, when you're simply feeding it the system with newer, younger donors, you're always bottom feeding. They're coming in at the lower end and moving their way up. And then what I tell people, of course, principle 7 of the 8 principles is refresh and renew and refresh. I had to think about that for a minute. Renew and refresh. First, renew everything and then add people. First, think about renewing people, then adding people. All right. And what I tell people is there's no dearth of money. There's plenty of money, but there's a limited number of individuals who will find your cause appealing enough to make a gift. And if you churn through those people, if you churn through them, you're going to be hurting in a bad way. Now,
see, Larry, retention isn't as sexy as acquisition. And it's a lot better for agencies, right? Because I can say, oh, just give me more money. I'll go get you more donors. Oh, you have this retention problem? Oh, that probably means you need new donors. So, the whole industry is at fault in this thing, even us included, because we actually
that's a legitimate answer. That's someone will actually say that as a legitimate answer. Wow.
Yes. Every day.
I'm remembering way back in the dark ages when I was at SUNY Buffalo, State University of New York, and I was assistant vice president of development, wherever that was. Anyway, we had created this really good advisory board for the engineering school dean, and made of high-level people, a lot of activity. And then the president comes over one day. He wants to attend. Oh, I want one of these, he says. Okay, that's how presidents are, And they were talking about, and Bill began to launch into his enrollment problem, his recruiting problem. Well, here are these CEOs, and they're looking at the numbers, and they just kind of say it. There's no coloring. He said, Bill, you don't have an enrollment problem. You got a retention problem. They were at the back door as fast as they're coming in the front door. And the driving obstacle there, as it turned out, was the way they'd had their courses scheduled and offered. It made it very, very difficult to get a conventional 4-year degree in 4 years, you see. Well, what student's going to hang around the next year or 18 months and pay more tuition when you can go right down the street and get the same thing? You see, you're not going to hang around. You see, and that I've always remembered that you do not have a recruiting problem. You have a retention problem. They're not staying. So what's the issue? And I'm going to get your reaction to this statement. I talked to a regional major gift officer. I guess it's been 3 or 4 months now. Works for a respected name brand university. Not one of the Ivies, but a name brand university. And he was telling me what the new regime wants from major giving. All right. They want standard asks of 100K, one after another. They don't really care if they get a renewal gift. It's wham, bam, move on. And I said to him, I'll just say, Bill, well, aren't they afraid of running out of donors? You want to hear the response? I was stunned. Talk about cynical. Well, yes, they know we're churning through donors, but they think by the time we churn through these, the new crop of alumni, we're ready to run them through.
Jeez. Or those major gift officers will have moved on to some other organization, so they don't really care.
Yeah, when. All right, when. Not if. And I mean, for someone who believes in the essence of philanthropy as bringing civil society, that's just the worst of the worst for me. It's so cynical. And of course, this man was disturbed about it as well, and he's getting to look around. But that's the word. I mean, when I was in higher ed and I ran 2 or 3 major gift programs, there was a certain degree of rigor and documentation and moving people and all that kind of thing. But at least when I was there, we never stopped seeing people as people for the reason they're making a gift, you see. And one thing I like about you, Tim, and I think as we get to know one another, you're in the digital space where that would be very easy to do. And yet you're making a concerted effort for that not to be the case. That's what you're telling me.
Well, absolutely. And because we're finding that the more that you humanize your interaction with your supporters, even if you use technology, the more effective it is. People don't give to email machines, Larry.
No.
People give to people, right?
Right.
They don't give to websites. They don't get to direct mail campaigns. They don't give to capital campaigns. People give to people. And the more that you can create an experience, like a one-to-one interaction where you are sitting across the table from somebody, the more effective, regardless of the channel, your fundraising will be.
So, do you work with clients? I know that you have you have the institute and you do the research, you do a lot of the marketing research work. Um, um, and you mentioned to me, I think before we began, that you're really looking at unpacking why donors give.
That's correct.
Then you would consider your work either parallel or different than the work that the Giving Institute does with its surveys.
I think what they're looking at is they're analyzing lots of data and preference information, right? So looking at, like, what are the giving patterns across the industry? How much is coming into the space? How much is going out? How many people are participating? How many people are not participating anymore? And what we try to do is say, at an individual level, like, what actually really works at getting more people to say yes. So, like, our mission here at NextAfter is to decode what works in fundraising and share it as broadly as we can with the nonprofit industry so that we can achieve our vision of unleashing the most generous generation in the history of the world. And so a few years back, I asked my team, I said, hey guys, our vision is to unleash generosity. How do we measure that? And so, we started looking at data, and you can look at the Giving USA reports and things. And, if you look at it over time, it ebbs and flows from year to year, but, like, it's going up and to the right. More money is moving into the nonprofit space. But when you look at other factors, like the percentage of disposable income that people are giving, it's hovered at around 2%, right? And it's actually been going down over the most recent years. And then actually another startling figure is that the number of people that are giving to charitable organizations and or volunteering is going down over time. So what does that mean? We got more money coming into the space and less people giving. Is that a good thing?
Well,
And
no.
here's actually a more disturbing question. Is it our fault? Are we so obsessed with trying to maximize ROI that we're not giving every person the opportunity to participate in personal generosity? This is why I think technology can really help us, because we can more efficiently go and put the messages in front of people, but it's got to be the right message to the right person at the right time. And you can do that at scale with digital communications. And so that's why I believe that, there is an opportunity to achieve our vision or make some sort of dent in it. And if we even just make a small dent, that's a life well lived.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some of the trends that you've just brought up. There's this proverbial missing middle everyone keeps talking
Oh
about.
my gosh. Yeah. I
The
did a study on it. Yeah.
and then
It's called the Midlevel Donor Crisis.
well, I'm going to give you my take on this, and you can react to it. Anyway, so you have this missing middle, and I put quotes around missing, and then the over reliance or the increasing reliance on large mega donors, put quotes around mega donors, and then concurrent to that, and I do think it's concurrent, you have the explosion of DAFs, donor advised funds, which nonprofits love to loathe. They think somehow they're their enemy when it's really a symptom of what's going on with donor behavior. Now, because what I see, of course, I'm looking at it more empirically and not in terms of digitally or analytically, but empirically, is that donors are not being engaged properly or consistently in over time. So in the case of the DAF, which is a mid-level capacity tool, 100 to 250, somewhere in that range.
Oh, don't get me started on DAFs. I could go for days.
But my point is, these are the people that are looking to be philanthropic, but many of them have not been engaged. They want some place to park their money, just park their money. And so, and then I hear, I've heard this since I've been in the business, the proverbial, I never hear from you till you ask me for money routine, that lack of engagement with donors. I think that's what it is primarily, is that the missing middle isn't missing, it's unengaged. You want to react to that?
Wow. I mean, there's so many things that you just said there. Let's start with your final part of your question there. Here's our observation and our hypothesis. Having worked with lots of nonprofit organizations and understanding a little bit about their mid-level giving program or lack thereof, here's what we came to understand, right? When somebody gives between, whatever the threshold is, 1,000 and 5,000 or 10,000, right? They're too valuable to be considered part of the broad donor base that gets the direct response, the emails, the direct mail, that kind of stuff. And so what they'll do is they'll pull them out of that communication stream. So they are now no longer engaged through direct mail or email or some of these other channels. And instead what they do, they say, you know what, this person's not quite a major donor yet, but they have the potential to become one. So I know what we'll do. Let's go put them and add them to our major gift officer's caseload. And the major gift officers are most often incentivized to raise a certain number. They have to hit a certain target amount that they have to raise for the organization. And so what do? Well, they work the upper end of their portfolio, and they never get to these prospects that are added that are really mid-level givers. And so what happens is these people that have showed that they actually are growing in their desire to, support this organization with greater dollars gets cut off from communication at the bottom end. And then they don't receive any love from the major gift officers on the top end. So they go into this fundraising black hole. So we said, let's go and see if that's true. So we gave gifts between $1,000 and $5,000 to 57 different organizations. And then we monitored how these organizations engage with us after we made those gifts. And guess what we found? Very few organizations, I don't have the exact stats in front of me, but I think it was like, out of the 57, maybe 5, thanked us for our gifts. We got like,
Let's run that
we would
past
get
the
some just
audience
general
one more time.
communication.
Let's run that audience.
I'm sorry?
After 57, 5 acknowledged your gift.
Well, no, we would get acknowledgement. So we gave all the gifts online.
Thank you.
So we would get like an email follow-up or something like that. But what
a
I'm saying is
real
like,
thank you. A real thank you.
I think there was like maybe, it was either 4 or 5 organizations had a personal phone call because we gave our phone number. We gave our postal address. I think 4 or 5 had some sort of personal thank you for your gifts. My name is whatever, whatever. If there's anything I can do, here's how your gift will be used, blah, 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 blah. The rest, we would just get dumped into some sort of communication stream. In many cases, we didn't get anything. Nothing. It's insane. So what that validates to me is that our hypothesis is in fact true. Because we gave a gift over a certain threshold, we didn't get the normal communication stream that like somebody that would give $100 would give. And because we were at the bottom end of the major gift officer's caseload, we never got the love from, the major gift officer in many cases. And so we were in this black hole.
Well, it's nice to feel validated, Tim. My instincts were right.
I wish I was wrong. Yeah.
But I've been in this business too long, Tim. I've seen an awful lot, and there's not much new that surprises me. Maybe the way it's packaged is maybe new. But I can learn new tricks that way. But yes, it's similar. Let me give you, and I didn't realize how radical this was at the time when I, way back earlier in my career, I worked, for Ketchum for 8 years, and then I wanted to get into higher ed. So I went to the State University of New York, Buffalo. Now at that time, Buffalo, the SUNY system was coming off this, what I call the Rockefeller model of higher ed, meaning they pay for everything. Well, they couldn't pay for everything anymore. And so now the campuses were having to develop their bona fide philanthropy programs, fundraising programs. And Bill Greiner, who was president at that time, took it very, very seriously. They had a research foundation, and he took off all the unallocated cash out of that research foundation to fund this fundraising program for the first 3 or 4 years. So they had a small foundation because it was a private school that had been absorbed into SUNY, but it was very small. And then so in the first 3 years of him starting that program, they went from 6 fundraising professionals to 96 fundraising professionals.
Holy moly.
Wow. I mean, they were pouring money in like no tomorrow. Okay. So, and here's what they did, which I didn't realize was as smart as it is. They had a mid-range program they called special giving, and it was specifically the low 4-figure to the very low 5-figure. That's where it was. All right. They had officers that did nothing but call on these people. That's all they did. Just like you would have, just like you would a major gift officer. That's all they did. And then in addition to that, they had their own communications track, you see, which wasn't the standard mail communication. but they had their own custom communications track. And then if they were alumni, that was fed in as part of it. I didn't realize how smart that was when I was there. Now I see that that was really smart. And so then the major gift thing was, they considered that, and this was like in the late 90s, early 2000s, a major gift was considered the equivalent of 25K over 5 years. That was the floor. Okay. And then, and I had 13 school-based officers that were assigned to do that. And we built that program. But then the special giving people, which was the 1 to say 20 or whatever it was, they coordinated with us, you see. So there wasn't this overlap. There wasn't this black hole in the middle. And so they've been able to grow their program very aggressively over a relatively short.
I'm sure they have. I'm sure they have. And
because,
so I mean,
and here's where you know why they had to do that? They didn't have the option, Tim. They didn't have a bunch of people at the major gift level sitting there waiting to be asked. They had to build the funnel.
Right. Exactly. And this is, so after we did that study, this is where we realized that technology can help solve this problem. And so what we did is we created this new program. We tested out with several of our clients. We call it Vader. I know it's a funny nickname. The Virtual Automated Donor Rep. So what we do is we use marketing automation systems to send highly personalized, one-to-one seeming communications from the major gift officer, but they never have to actually send them themselves. So they come in the form of emails, text messages. If the donor replies to any of those communications, it goes directly to the major gift officer. Now they've got a warm lead that they can work, but they don't have to do any of the cultivation. It happens automatically, right? And what we found is when we put that program in place, I mean, they grew their, not just their mid-level giving program. I mean, these people became so much more engaged that they kept giving at that level, but we graduated a lot of people up to the major gift level as well. And in some cases, we even got like estate gifts. It was actually pretty amazing just to see the result of that. But this is where technology can really fill the gaps. But what we did in those communications, we never make an ask. All we're doing is delivering value. We're sending them things. We're giving them updates. We're saying, hey, I'm going to be in this area. Let me know if if you'd like to grab coffee. So all it's doing is basically just cultivating the relationship in the background so that when somebody then replies, you have a warm lead that you can engage.
I want to stress that they were getting all of this engagement and content, and they were not being solicited in any way.
That's correct.
It's very clear. Now you compare that to, before we started this interview, I mentioned to you about a major gift program I was acquainted to, and that leadership was saying, you never make a call unless you're making an ask. I mean, yike.
Right.
And it's out there. It's out there. So
Larry, have you ever had a neighbor that like every time you walk outside, he wants to borrow like your hammer, your rake, your whatever, you know what I mean? He's just always asking, taking. What do? You stop talking to that neighbor. If you see him outside, you stay inside, right? That's the same way that donors treat major gift officers that always ask all the time.
I'm reading this book. I don't have it in front of me. It's called Persuasion or something. And you may even be familiar with it, but it talks about the different ways people are persuaded. And number one,
Cialdini?
Let's see.
It's probably Cialdini. If it's called Persuasion, I know that book.
It's probably that. I don't see it right in front of me. I got too many books here. Anyway, they listed the different ways, techniques, or approaches you can use to persuade someone. And the number one approach was reciprocity. All right.
Oh, of course.
I'll do something for you. You do something for me. It's this back and forth, and that seems to be lost, Tim. That seems.
Can I give you digital evidence for why reciprocity is such a powerful tool in fundraising?
Please do.
Okay. So our main approach with all of our clients is to focus on not trying to get somebody to initially give a gift. It's to get them to receive a gift from the organization. So what will we do? We'll take whatever sort of content the organization produces and we'll turn it into ebooks and online courses and surveys and quizzes and engagement things. And all we're doing is we're giving something to the donor. Say, hey, we just created this new ebook on this topic. We thought you might be interested. Would you like to receive it? If they say yes, And this is actually honestly how we do a lot of acquisition of new donors. We will go run Facebook ads and it's got free ebook about whatever, whatever, whatever. You click on the thing, you fill out your name, you fill out your email address, you hit submit, and then you receive this ebook in your inbox. After somebody takes that action, immediately following that, on the thank you page, it says, "Thank you so much, Larry. Your ebook will be in your inbox shortly. But while I have you, let me tell you a little bit more about how we're trying to solve XYZ problem. And this is how you can, help with your gift today and blah, 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 blah." And guess what we find is like the higher perceived value of what we're offering to people, the higher conversion rate to donor in that first exchange. So it's there's a direct correlation to how valuable the potential donor perceives what we're offering to them for free and what their response rate is on the other side of that.
Okay, now I'm
It's
gonna
pretty
push you a little bit here. How you
great.
how do you determine perceived value? Is there a way to
Well, yeah. So for example, like in some cases, we'll have like a petition or an open letter, right? You can add your name to this thing. Well, that's a gift in some sense because you're giving people a voice. You're allowing them to go and say, "I stand for this thing too." That's great. The conversion rate for something like that, because the engagement is so small, it's like, slacktivism. It doesn't take a lot of my mental energy to go and actually engage with that specific offer. The conversion rate to donor is very, very small. However, you get lots and lots of people that sign it. So what I get then is a bunch of email addresses that I can then connect the dots and work over time. If I go and say, then maybe bump it up and say, I've got an ebook that I'm offering you, right? Has a little bit more perceived value. I'm receiving something that has, it's going to take me longer to mentally engage with this thing. The conversion rate for ebooks is much higher than that of petitions. And then we do a lot of work with like Hillsdale College. And I don't know if you're familiar with them, but one of their main things that they do is they've opened
I'm,
up their
I'm
course
on their
catalog.
list. I've been on their
Okay.
list, but like
Okay.
I'm the receiver of a lot of this, Tim. And when I found out
Okay.
they were your client, I'm going, oh, okay, now I can see this. They're very sophisticated at what they do. Oh yes, I was going
That's
to
right.
bring
And
them
so
up.
what they do is,
I didn't know if you wanted to bring up
yeah,
name clients here, but yeah, they do a superb job of exactly what you're saying. And I'm not an
exactly.
alumnus either.
Right, exactly. And very few are. I mean, they only have like 2,500 students or something like that. But what they do is they opened up their entire course catalog. So they have like millions and millions and millions of people that are taking their online courses to learn about the Constitution and about the founding fathers and about the great books and about like, math and all kinds of weird things. But those courses are 100% free. And so the perceived value of an online course is much higher than the perceived value of an ebook, and certainly much higher than an open letter signature. And so what we find is on the other side of people signing up for those courses, the conversion rate to donor is much, much higher. So it validates the theory that reciprocity, yes, is in fact a very powerful thing in fundraising. And the more valuable the thing that you offer to your potential donor, the higher potential for them to then respond in kind.
I'm thinking of a situation that predates digital fundraising, where the same technique was used through the mail, through television,
Mm-hmm.
and it was at the time it marked a radical shift from the way this particular kind of organization would solicit their donors, and that would be Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, BGEA.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I grew
Yep.
up. They never sold you anything. They never asked you
Right.
anything. They would offer you something, a new book or an
That's
article
right.
by Reverend Graham or something else. They were constantly doing that. And see, the thing I found that I think, well, that made him so remarkable in many ways was that he was the absolute inverse of what the profession of itinerant evangelism was at that time. The inverse,
Hmm.
because it had
Hmm.
such a horrible you're not old enough to know this, okay, but it had such a horrible reputation. They were, charlatans, grifters, you name it. They were always there to get their love offering and skip town, you see. And
Right.
when he established his ministry, and I had the opportunity to get to know George Beverly Shea. I never met Graham himself, but I learned a lot through Mr. Shea. He was determined not to do it that way. Right away, he incorporated himself. Right away, he subjected his organization to independent audits every year. That was radical.
Hmm.
That was now
Right.
we think that's sort of an accepted thing. It wasn't then, to make his finances totally transparent. So,
Integrity. Right. Hmm.
but there you had the integrity. So you have a whole life of someone like Reverend Graham. people would disagree with his theology, they would never question the man's integrity. You see, he was
Right.
always right there, and so he commanded everyone's respect, even if they didn't agree with the man. So so now what you're saying to me, and I want to get this across to our audience, is that someone like Reverend Graham didn't have the advantage of digital fundraising. It all had to be done through snail mail or face-to-face or television.
Sure. Yeah.
And so now this is a sort of an accelerant if you do it the right way. If
That's correct. I mean, that's right. I mean, like you see this all the time in direct mail, like the mailing labels, the little tchotchkes, the little things that people send as front end premiums to try to get somebody to become a new supporter for the organization. It's the
well,
same
now let me
exact
ask you
thing.
about that.
Nothing's new under the sun.
Let me ask you about that. Isn't it what elicits the best response? Is it the unsolicited thing? It's the I get it in the mail from the XYZ organization and I get the return address labels or something else, and then there's an ask in there, which to me could come across as a guilting. Or is it a straight offer that says I'd like to send you some? Now, would you talk about
Yes.
that for a minute?
Yeah. See, you're very perceptive. So in many cases, if we're using some of these free offers in acquisition, the prospective donor is choosing that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between the kind of offers that we create for digital and the kind that you get like in the form of mailing labels is that whatever offer that we're providing represents the value proposition of the organization. It's an ebook about the problem or about the solution.
Stop
It's a
right there.
course that you can
Let's
take. Yeah.
stop right
Yeah.
there. What you're offering, you want to say that again for the audience? Let's take it nice and slow.
What we're offering in the form of a digital freemium or free offer is something that helps the donor to understand, connect with, or experience the value proposition of the organization.
There we go.
Because it's content about, like the ebook is about the problem or about the solution, or the course is about you getting to experience what it's like to be a Hillsdale student and get this top, notch education, but 100% for free. And so, of course, you feel, a little bit indebted for that. But at the same time, you're also understanding a little bit more about the mission of the organization. And sometimes your heart connects to that and say, you know what, this is so great. I wish, and this is how I feel. I've got like at least 10 bricks on the campus of Hillsdale College. Like I love them. I'm a big donor for them. And it's because I wish that I could do my life over and be smart and go and get the kind of education that I know is available at a place like Hillsdale College. And so I feel so grateful that they've opened all that up to me, that I'm able to participate in it. Even though I can never get my degree there, I can still learn about the beauty of knowledge like the students at Hillsdale College. And so I'm going to support that to make sure it's always there. See what I'm saying? It's like that
Yes.
connection to the cause.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, yes. Let's talk a little bit about that new buzzword, AI. You want to
Oh boy.
venture into that pond a little bit?
Is this not the time to tell you that I started a new AI technology company? Anyway, so I think AI is kind of it's interesting. It certainly has utility, but it does not replace human beings. And I think that people that think that that's where we're at with this thing are very, very misinformed. What it can do is it can help accelerate the process of, in the case of like generative AI, right? Like in Chat GPT, it can help accelerate the process of going from zero to something, right? But once you have the something is not fully correct. In many cases, it's actually riddled with errors. In some cases, AI does what's called, tripping or hallucinating. It hallucinates and it makes up stuff it's not even real. So you still have to go and edit and do all the things you need to do to make sure that whatever piece of content is being generated by this tool is actually really right for your audience. It's really right for your organization. And it's really the right kind of message you want to send to one of your supporters. But it can be helpful to really, like I said, accelerate that process.
Well, let's talk about something that's a little different in the way it's applied. You're talking about generating content. There are those, and they will remain nameless, who promote the idea that somehow AI can pinpoint the donor when they're going to make a gift, for how much, and for what. And I
Yeah.
find that just outrageous, all right, quite frankly, that they would make such a statement. I'm an engineer. I don't know how many people, I think a lot of people in the audience know that. I studied Boolean algebra. I studied, higher level equations. I know the limitations and the assumptions of these tools. They're useful. Okay. But to make that, and then in a promotion for this one company's tool, they had a third party endorsement from an individual who represented a pretty well, I wouldn't say huge, but it was a name brand nonprofit. And the endorsement went something like this: well, I really like X because it enables us to decide which donors we can pursue and which we can ignore.
Yikes.
And that was the word, ignore. All right. I'm thinking they put that in writing, both in terms of the vendor using that as an endorsement, and two, that the individual who represented this nonprofit would actually say something. And that just leapt off the page at me. Tim, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, see, this is where I say, are we part of the problem as it relates to the decreasing participation rate of people in America in philanthropy? And the reason why is because we've gotten so good at data analytics and wealth screening and target marketing that we're only targeting the people that have the highest capacity to give the most amount of money and create the highest ROI, right? And so by nature, to be more efficient, right? To actually hit those efficiency metrics that all the people in the watchdog world obsess and bow down to all the time, we have to be selective about who we mail, who we contact, who we call, who we get on the airplane to go visit. And so what happens is you're shrinking your universe of supporters because so many people are not having the opportunity to participate in personal generosity. Why? Because they don't even know about it. Because they've never even heard from you, because you've never appealed to them in some way, right? So I think that we're part of the problem. Technology is actually making us better at excluding people from participating in philanthropy. Is that good? Right?
No,
And like
no.
I said, I just started a technology company, but I'm taking the opposite approach. What I want to do is I want to enable nonprofit organizations to compete on the same level playing field as consumer brands. We are so saturated with consumerism in our world today, right? Every single message, we're bombarded with it. When you open your inbox, when you pick up your phone, when you turn on the television, when you turn on the radio, it's just like you. We're a bunch of narcissistic, just little babies, right?
You
Why?
think?
Because we've been conditioned that way. And
You think?
I know. I'm sorry. I'm just on a stump speech now. But
Ahead.
but what if we could? What if
Preach it, Tim.
nonprofits could actually communicate, right? What if every other ad you saw on TV was not for a consumer brand, but for another nonprofit cause, right? Can you imagine what that would do to the collective psyche of people of saying, yes, you could go get something for yourself. You can go get that new pair of Jimmy Choos, or you
If
could hold back a portion and
if
you could go and give that portion to somebody who needs your help,
I
right?
agree, if that's going to
End
happen,
of speech. End of rant.
if if that happens, Tim, there's going to have to be, how do I phrase this? A pretty significant change in the way nonprofits present themselves to their potential philanthropic public. And here's my chance to wax here for a minute or two. Okay. As you know, even the most relational organizations, the ones that really value other people being a part of who they are, their model is generally, I have my nonprofit and I am pursuing it and I need money. Well, then I go out here and I get the money and apply it to my mission. Well, that raises money, as you know, and you can even be pretty relational with it. But what we talk about at the 8 Principles, Tim, is something that is perhaps subtle but fundamentally different. All right. You have a nonprofit with a worthy mission that's going to really affect people's lives in a positive way, maybe a big group, small group. And then there are investors out here, I call them philanthropic investors, that are looking for places to achieve what they're looking to achieve, which is generally some form of self-realization. They want to see themselves there.
Are they really looking though, Larry? I mean, do you know how many people go to Google and search where can I give my money away today? About zero.
No. I'm not talking. You're going right to the operations. Let's go up a level. Okay. They may not be voicing it, but it's there. They would like that opportunity, but they don't get the opportunity. All right. They're searching, but it's not in an active sense. All right. So that if the nonprofit can create the paradigm that reaches out to these people, identifies who they are, and brings them closer together as partners to the organization so that they accomplish something that neither group can do on its own, that's when the magic happens. You see, that's when the magic happens. And the research has been done on this. You know Russell James, don't you? You know Russell. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I always knew it worked this way, but he did the research that proves it. So we use this when we promote our own stuff. But anyway, so that requires a couple of things. First of all, it requires that the nonprofit realize that it's not about them or their wonderful cause. It's about satisfying the dreams and desires of their investors. It's in some ways it's similar to the way tech startups are funded. You've got investors out here that really want to be a part, but you got to make them partners, or they're not going to go anywhere with you. You see, and so that's what I'm talking. It's a different way of looking at the whole thing. Russell says, I like what he puts it is, too many nonprofit executives want to be the star of their own movie, and they can't be. I'm sorry, you know. And the way I put it is, God save me from nice people. All right, that they're so nicely minded they can't understand that it takes these people coming together. Now let's go back and talk about the retention issue. You know this is better than I do. Retention rate for consumer products, 95% overall. So I tell people, guess what? People are more loyal to their toothpaste than they are their nonprofit. Why is that? Well,
because toothpaste has billion-dollar advertising budgets, and nonprofits can only spend less than 10% of their budget on quote unquote administration and overhead and fundraising.
That's yes and no. You know, yes, Tim, but that's kind of an out. That's kind of an opt. It's like, okay, because of scale, we can keep everybody. I don't think.
Why do you keep buying the same brand of toothpaste? Is because every time you buy that brand of toothpaste, you're going to see an ad on television that's going to create brand recall. And so when you go to the store the next time, you're going to go buy that same brand of toothpaste. I mean, that's why it works.
All right.
We don't have the same resources.
All right.
So we got to get smarter and better. Right.
Well, it's smarter and better, but it's not necessarily, I would question that. It's not necessarily a matter of scale. P&G didn't start out big. They started small like everybody else. Kimberly-Clark started like small like everybody else. You see, it was the consistency and the presence, which can be done on a smaller scale, built. See, principle 5 is work from the inside out. See, the difficulty I have with some digital fundraising is it's like it's just blast everything out there. No, and the sustainable programs that grow and continue to grow over time are focused on their core and continue to move out in concentric circles. And so they never lose track of what's driving them in the center. You want to?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That's exactly how we approach it as well. But at the same time, like, if you want to scale your organization, you need to go and start to bring new donors into the fold. And so, like, how do you do that at scale? You can't go jump on an airplane and just start flying around the country and just, knocking on doors. That just would not be very efficient.
Oh, I agree. And
so what we need to do is we need to have an efficient way of bring people in, and then we need to have an efficient way of move people up. But the ultimate goal is still the same. I 100% agree with you. The most effective form of fundraising is when you and I can sit across the table from each other. You can explain the problem, you can explain the opportunity, and you can explain how I can be the one that actually makes that opportunity real, right? That is always going to be the most highest form of fundraising.
Well, see,
but we need each other.
I'm actually your friend here, because what I tell people is that, in the bad old days, when everything was on 3x5 cards and you had to make personal visits, and if you wanted to learn anything about someone, you had to hire a warm body to make trips down to the courthouse. That limited that kind of personalization to a pretty high level. All right. Now, with the electronic tools, if they're used appropriately, Tim, I think you and I agree with that, give smaller nonprofits the opportunity to scale. So you don't have to start with $1 million. You can start much smaller, and then it will move from the inside out. I mean, we're kind of saying the same thing, I hope.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, part of what I'm trying to do is create a feeder system for mid-level major gifts and transformational givers of the future, but they got to start somewhere. And most of them, and based on our research, based on data we've analyzed, 60% of the donors that become major donors start with gifts of $100 or less.
Why am I not surprised? It's always been like that.
Yeah.
It's always,
Right.
the rule of thumb I'd seen for years and years is that if someone's capable of making a gift of $1,000, it's generally going to be their third to fifth gift, somewhere in that range, because of the engagement of the individual. That's what it is. So one of them I want to talk to you about, one of my pet peeves, and I don't think you're one of these, is selling Ferraris to people that should be buying lawnmowers. You know what I'm talking about?
I think I call it buttering your bread with a chainsaw. Same thing. It's like we over technologize our organizations. Like we think that like if we get the new shiny CRM, all of our CRM problems will go away. If we get the new email system, all of our problems will go away. If we go and get like the big Cadillac online donation platform that automatically decides what the gift amount's going to be and blah, 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 all that's good. All our problems are going to go away. And it's just, the reality is it's not, and it's not true. And different organizations need different tool sets. But here's the problem. This is the problem with every single nonprofit that I encounter makes. They buy the tool first, and then they create the strategy second. I'm like, why would you do that? If you went and built a
Right
house,
there.
you wouldn't go and buy all the materials and then hire an architect. Right?
Let's do that one more time. They buy the tool first, then they figure out the strategy. All right.
And you end up backing into a strategy. Yeah. Exactly.
I see this and say, I'm going to quote you on that. Do you mind?
Quote me.
All right.
True.
I'm going to start using that. Well, and I'm thinking of, we have an educational platform to realign organizational thinking on this, and it's a relatively new organization. And the first thing I heard was, well, they went ahead and bought their CRM, and now they don't have any money to do any planning with. I mean, I just wanted to go, pardon my French, holy shit. What kind of
right. What are you doing?
Is that? And these,
well, it's like I said, yeah, it's like buying all the building materials and all the the equipment and then hiring an architect. And he's like, yeah, I can't make something out of this stuff. You don't have cinder blocks. Oh, we needed cinder blocks. I didn't know that. Well, because we didn't plan for it.
Yeah, I bought too much roofing material, or I bought all this this deluxe interior stuff that we aren't going to use,
waste.
or whatever
it
is.
It's waste. It's all
well,
waste.
and then of course they get hooked on this stuff, and they get into these contracts and whatever, and they get loaded. And there are some of these firms, which we will not name, that are more predatory than others in the way they do their sales and the way they suck people in, which bothers me. When I was
funny, I think you and I talked about this last time we were together, but I was like, some of these are publicly traded companies, and like you go and like read their, their quarterly earnings report, and in it they're bragging about the new deceptive ways that they've locked people into ever escalating contracts. I'm just like, you're putting this in writing in your investor deck. I'm like, are you insane? I mean, this is the world we live in.
Well, they are depending upon the lack of interest and ignorance of their clients. That it's truly lambs being led to slaughter in some ways, because I guess I don't think that nonprofit people are any more susceptible than others, but I work with them, so it seems to me that a lot of them are easily pixelated by these sorts of claims. Even the wording, Tim, they say they're selling solutions. No, they're selling a tool. It's a tool. It is not a solution. All right. And the tool is only as useful as the person using it. All right. And that too. All right. And the metaphor I always like to use is, and of course I have to change my artists now because people are getting older, but you can buy, let's say, a really cheap cello, like $100. All right. And you can put that, in front of an 8-year-old, and you're going to get pretty predictable outcome. All right. You can take that same inferior instrument and put it in the hands of Yo-Yo Ma, and something completely different is going to come out of that thing. Completely different. Same inferior tool. Different user. The expertise and understanding and the wisdom of the user is what really gets the productivity out of the tool. You agree with that?
100%. I mean, oftentimes people will buy enterprise level software, but they don't have enterprise level resources to operate it. And so then they're stuck, right? And then you end up, basically being, like I said, buttering your bread with a chainsaw. All you need is probably a spreadsheet. and you've got a,
Well, I've
big CRM system.
I've told people like that, really small organizations, have you ever heard of something called Excel?
I have. I
You
use
know,
it every
that's what
day.
have you ever heard of that? And maybe just start there. You don't need, well, when you're dealing with a client that has this idea that technology is going to solve their problem, presumably you want their business if you can get it, if you really want it. What do you say to them? Do you just call them idiots, or
Well,
what do you say?
no. What we do, so we are not a technology company. We're a services company. We're a consultant. I mean, just like you. Only we advise on how to use, more digital communications, but it's the same principle. And so what we'll do is we'll say, let's start by doing an audit of everything that you're doing. Like, give me access to all of your sources of data, your CRM system, your email system, your web analytics system, your advertising platforms. And then we've got a team of data scientists that stitch all that data together, and we start to look at their program in a way that maybe they've never looked at it themselves before, because all their data is in all these disparate places. And then we kind of go through all our communications and what they're sending out to the marketplace. And we do these mystery donor studies with the organizations to see how they actually engage with us. Oh, we've got this great program in place where we follow up and we do this and that. Well, we gave you a donation and nothing happened. So something's broken, right? So we just start by kind of like, putting it all on the table. And then we start by building a 3-year systematic plan to strategically grow digital revenue. It's a planning process. We're creating a blueprint. And then once we have the blueprint, we say, okay, what tools do you have? Are they the right tools to be able to execute this blueprint? And if not, then we'll make recommendations for technology shifts. But we're not in the business of schlepping software. What we're in the business of is trying to optimize how the organization leverages digital communications to grow their donor base.
Well spoken. Well spoken.
Thank you.
So then you invariably get clients that are already up to their neck in this sort of stuff. And
Yes.
so how, if someone comes to you and they're well-meaning, but they've managed to get deeper and deeper into that quicksand, what sort of prescription do you, in general, what sort of approach do you use to extract them from that?
Well, you know what? After they've gone through an exhaustive audit, which is kind of a beatdown. I mean, we really kind of shred the organization. I always have to apologize. I said, I just want to remind you that you're paying us to do this. Okay. So just,
You're
saddle up,
paying us to be
fight down
beaten.
hard on something because it's going to be a long night. Right. But anyway, so we go through that process. And then, once we have the plan in place, we have projections saying, if you do this plan, this is what your growth rate will look like. This is what your revenue look like. This is how many new donors you can bring into the fold. But your existing technology is not going to work. So we need to replace this thing, or we need to replace this thing. And it's usually not much of a fight. It's usually pretty okay, we trust you. I mean, we know now. We just, we made a mistake. I mean, sometimes people are entrenched, they have this, what's it called? Sunk costs kind of, phenomenon, where it's just you just keep feeding the beast because you're afraid to stop. And so, we try to free them from that as gently as we can, but, don't always get people to change. But in most cases we can, because we're bringing all this research and all this testing, and we've got all this data, and we've looked at them and all of their data. And we say, you guys could look like this too. You just got to make these changes.
So, is there, what would be the floor in terms of size of budget of an organization that you would take on as a client at any level?
Yeah, I mean, we're really working with the upper 3.5% of the nonprofit space for two reasons. Number one, because the upper 3.5% represents 80% of all transactions, right? And so if you want to go and unleash the most generous generation, you got to start where all the action's at. But what we're taking is everything we learned from those big guys, and that's why we're trying to make it accessible to these little guys. That's why we created the Institute, where if you can't afford to hire us, you can go train yourself, your staff, or whatever, and do it yourself. We'll give our entire playbook. It's all available if you go through our Institute. And so we've done that for the last 6 or 7 years. And what we're realizing is okay, great, I've got the knowledge. I still don't have the right skill set people that can do all this. And I don't have, budget to go hire more people. And that's why we're building this software system that's taking everything we've learned from research, from testing, experimentation, and data analysis, and baking it into this one platform that'll enable, an organization as small as maybe $500,000 a year in operating, income to be able to, or operating revenue to be able to go and, run digital plays online.
And when is
So
that
that's
going
what
to come? What's the schedule for that?
it is in beta. We have about, I guess 20 or so customers that are kind of using it and giving us some feedback. So it launched May 1st, but really the big coming out party is going to be in September when we have our nonprofit innovation optimization summit.
So, and this is going to be the next step beyond the Institute.
That's correct. That's correct.
So the Institute, I've seen it, it's a series of online courses. And so now you're making it essentially dynamic, is what you're doing.
We're making a piece of software that does our exact process. It analyzes all your data. It then takes all the charts and the graphs and turns those into insights. The insights then lead to very specific strategic plays to run. And then it uses generative AI to go and create all the assets for the campaigns. And so all you got to do is put quarters in the machine and you're fundraising.
And this is going to be at a scale for organizations that are what, 500 to 1 million? That's small.
Yeah, I think organizations even that small could get value out of this platform.
Well, I want the audience to know that. What's the name of this tool? Can you tell me?
Yep, avidai.com. avidai.com.
Avid with a D.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. Well, we'll be watching that. All right. I have one last subject I want to talk to you about.
Uh-oh. It's going to be a doozy.
Yes, it is. These are wonderful tools that you develop. They're great. They do great stuff. But it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. If an organization, its leadership, its understanding of fundraising, if they don't come at it with the right organizational alignment and mindset, no amount of tools is going to get them to their maximum. It may get it a little closer up, but it won't get what I would call, and I hate this word because it's so overused, to that quote transformational level. I wish there was another word. Okay. But what I tell people, and I'm sure you've heard me say this, being really successful in philanthropy is much more about what you're thinking than what you're doing. And that's why what we work with people is we want to adjust the mindset of every single person in an organization so that they know their role in this whole drama. Because you've heard that, oh, I don't like to ask for money. Well, okay, fine. That's about this much of it. Let's get on, do that. And what I tell people is, you've been in a Ritz-Carlton hotel, right, Tim?
Yep, of course.
Okay. All right. Well, then you know why that hotel chain is at the top of the luxury market. It's not because of the facilities, is it?
Not necessarily, no.
No, it's because
of the service, the people.
It's the way they make you feel when you're there. This is what we tell nonprofits. You align your whole organization, because if you can give your investors experiences, I could put quotes around that, any way you want to define that, which would include digital experiences, by the way, Tim. I'm not a technophobe. Okay, if you can give them those kinds of experiences they can't buy, and we've talked about some of those today, they will almost literally throw money at you, because they're hungry for something. They're hungry for that meaning. They're hungry for that belonging. And I'm talking about the naturally inclined philanthropic public. I'm not talking about the general population.
Sure. Yeah.
Somebody told me that a long time ago. Yeah, Larry, there's a lot of rich people never going to give you a dime. Just move on. And so we don't deal with those people. So this is what we do, Tim. And this is my soapbox, is that the guys like you who do great whiz bang things can have really great impact, but it's still not going to get an organization all the way to that top unless you're dealing with a client that understands this need to have this level of organizational realignment. That's what it is. And I'm a covey facilitator from the 90s, and I met Mr. Covey twice, and I love his work, and I like the way he structured his program, and so we kind of adopted some of the same formats and everything that he did, although they're now online and we are as well. But his shtick, the way he got started, I don't know if you know that history or not. He was a faculty member at Utah State, I think, not Brigham Young, but one of his churchmen was J. Willard Marriott Jr. All right, and they had just
Oh, wow.
acquired the Carlton hotel chain, which was a wreck. Okay, they were still living in the 19th century. Well, if you're not on the social register, do we really want to have you staying here? And that was like, yike, we got to do something. And so that was Covey's first success. He was hired by Marriott to go in and reorganize the culture of this company, just from top to bottom. So that's sort of what we do from a fundraising point of view. So that, for instance, everyone from a board chair to the clerk can be in the same room. See, because it's a team. And we're not using jargon. We're not using technical terms. That doesn't mean it's fundraising for dummies. It just means we're not using exclusionary language. We're language that everyone can understand if you're reasonably educated. So that's what we do. So I got my bit in. So anyway, so what do you want to say to our audience that you haven't been able to say?
I mean, look, I'm an experimenter, right? One of the things that and the reason why I run all these experiments and try to understand what works and what doesn't is because, after probably about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years in the nonprofit space, 5 of them as a consultant, I got this tremendous amount of pressure put upon me because everybody looked at me like I had the answer. Right? Because I'm the digital guy. Like you said at the onset of our call today, I'm the tech whiz guy. So to ask Tim, he'll know the answer. But deep down inside, I don't know all the answers, Larry. And that was killing me. And so when I discovered testing and experimentation, I realized I don't have to be the expert anymore, because the true experts of fundraising are the donors themselves. So what I did is I created an organization that puts us in a position of becoming a student of the teacher, which is our donor, so that I can learn from their behavior and continue to adapt how I communicate and relate with my supporters, so that I can ultimately achieve my vision of unleashing greater generosity. So what I would tell everybody on the call here today is, like, humble yourself. Humble yourself. Be willing to experiment, be willing to test, be willing to try, and be prepared to be wrong. And know that that's okay. Because every time you try something, every time you experiment, it either gives you a green arrow or red arrow. Regardless of that, it gives you a learning. And learnings are certainly much more valuable than any sort of increase in performance that you could possibly imagine. So that's all I'd have to say is stay curious, my friends. Keep testing.
Well, that's pretty dramatic here at the last. Thank you. Ladies, everyone, we've been listening and having a wonderful conversation with Tim Kachuriak, who's the co-founder, I believe, of NextAfter, a marketing guy who is a self-confessed non-techie who likes tech things and has, in my view, some pretty significant insights. This has been delightful, and I want to thank you for taking your time to do this, Tim.